It's Mike Levin, August 8th, 2017, around 9 a.m. On my way into work. And yesterday was a great example of what I'm actually trying to accomplish. So the idea is, when you're good at a language like Python and the APIs to such services as manipulating Google spreadsheets through the old GData API, using the GSpread client library that's on GitHub, you can start to actually express yourself creatively and spontaneously with relatively the same ease as you would sitting down to do something in, say, Microsoft Excel. So you see, yesterday was a project where I had to hit a bunch of data sources. I had to pull back the data and just plug it somewhere. And by virtue of plugging it in the right places, graphs and charts would just magically twinkle into place. It's a approach based on leveraging various Google services. When you look at how many services actually come into play on little tricks like that, it's quite surprising. There's the login service and interacting with OAuth 2, which is no small issue. You know, it's exactly one of those things like, you know, you have this problem, you want to secure a website, so you choose OAuth 2. Now you've got two problems. So anyway, I've created a library called Good Sheet, which you'll find in GitHub under my repos. It's one of the few that I've made public because I think it's of great utility, and it's a general file. I want to call it a package, but I didn't put it through the pip system or anything. I don't think it needs to be. It's just a file you drop into the same directory as your main repo, and you just include Good Sheet in your repo because it's such a minimal little thing that handles OAuth 2. And after OAuth 2, you're using the GData API, which interestingly predates all those other API services that are toggleable between on and off in the Google Developer Console. It's a location that's critical to using Google services, all except GData, due to the wonderful security context that Google brings to the picture. So your Google services are login, GData, and of course the data sources you hit, which in the case of this project was Google Analytics, GA, and you do that through another set of client libraries, Python client libraries that Google makes available to you, which can use the OAuth login previously mentioned. And if your company happens to use Google Apps, it used to be called Google Apps, whatever it is, you know, the corporate version of Google services, the logging context automatically works for everyone in the company. And so if you make a dashboard type thing in Google Sheets, it's just automatically and easily accessible to anyone with a link, so long as you give the file that type of accessible to anyone in the organization context or permission settings. So all these services sort of come into play to let you do, you know, stupid data tricks, keeping, you know, critical information always in front of the right people at the right time without having to sort of pester them with emails, because that's one approach to sort of keeping, you know, stakeholders or the interested parties informed of the latest information they need. And you know, while that can work, it's just an awful lot of emails. Even notifications of file updates could be a lot of emails. So I like bookmarks in browsers. You say, here are the bookmarks you should create in your browser under maybe a drop-down folder menu, the way browsers work these days with the menu toolbar, making a number of different dashboards that you just look at every morning as a part of your everyday routine, and it'll just use the login context you're already using for reading email, so you'll automatically be able to reach everything. And then you can use whatever graphing and charting and conditional color coding capabilities that are built into the spreadsheet to aid with the dashboard construction. Now, the big sacrifice here is that you're living in what is primarily a knockoff of Excel, which is a knockoff of Lotus, which is a knockoff of Visual Calc or VisiCalc, which is a knockoff of physical spreadsheets that accountants use to balance the books. And that's not always the best environment for data, but it happens to be the easiest environment for human beings to interact with. There's a whole series of packages whose tagline is "fill in the blank for humans." So I think Kenneth Wright's one of the most popular third-party package writers in the Python community, with his requests HTTP for humans package sort of set the trend. But the idea is that you want to work in easy APIs. You don't want to have to figure out and do cryptic stuff. So how do you do spreadsheet stuff? How do you do Excel stuff and do stupid data tricks in that environment that is, data for humans, spreadsheets? Because look at how popular spreadsheets are versus their database equivalent. Microsoft used to make a big deal of Microsoft Access. How often do you hear about Access today? Likewise, Google has knocked off almost every Microsoft Office suite package for the Google Docs suite. Don't even know what to call it really. But, they did Word, or I guess their version of Word is Docs. They did Slides, which is their PowerPoint, and Sheets, which is their Excel, and so on down the line. But they didn't particularly do Access, because database things are more centralized web server-like, web services-like technology, and Google has a bunch of those and doesn't need the redundancy. And Google Spreadsheets, Google Sheets, is database backed up after all, using their big table technology, which is basically a columnar database. So relational database management, or RDBMS, which is the world of SQL, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, Postgres, MySQL, the list goes on, is rows and columns, very much laid out like spreadsheet software. So there's a tight connection between RDBMS and spreadsheets. And that's why these two worlds have lived together in such tight union and harmony for so long. You would have lots of situations where the views, the virtual tables from a relational database, was directly exported and turned into an Excel-based report. So generating an Excel-based report is basically hitting the rows and columns of a virtual table that had some queries behind it that did unions and whatever aggregation it needed to get some answers. And then you just dump the contents of that view into an Excel spreadsheet and format it a little bit for prettiness and insert charts and stuff. So that kind of stuff has been around for a heck of a long time, all kinds of Excel automation. But now it makes sense to do those same stupid data tricks in the less brittle, because it's using basically the browser and cloud-based services, a less brittle Google Sheets based alternative. Stupid data tricks with Google Sheets. And you have a bunch of other stuff that could fulfill this sort of dashboard-like purpose that I think about using and I experiment with from time to time. One of the latest sexy ones is data studio. But much of my work hits data source after data source after data source. And whenever you have multiple data sources, you have these fragile things that are based on these data connection files sitting on your Google Drive, which if you even do a little file organization, it breaks. I don't like Google Data Studio because reports are too fragile, because data sources are not made robust enough. They are brittle. So there's no such thing as brittle data sources when you're handling all that nitty-gritty in Python using the best third-party library packages out there for each problem, each sub-problem that's part of your greater problem that you're solving. In this case, the Google Python client libraries for OAuth, and my good sheet on top of that for easy OAuth, and gspread for gdata interaction, and which manipulates Google spreadsheets, and a few other services thrown in, you know, hitting whatever Google data sources you need. And I talked about Python middleware before. So middleware, it's just this fancy term for, you've got some APIs over here, you got some APIs over here. It should not be difficult to run something rather lightweight in the middle to create output that is more valuable than, you know, the raw connection to data source A and data source B alone. In the middle, you can do middleware stuff. And middleware was a concept that, you know, almost exclusively belonged to Java through the mid to late 90s. And web services started to make a little dent in that world. And Microsoft was big into that, and they refactored all their stuff under IIS and .NET. So all the Microsoft web infrastructure could be used to provide web services, and things got really complex with these discovery services and nested services and complex data structures. There was something called SOAP there, and Corba. Corba was the Java equivalent to all this. So the Java world and the Microsoft world were duking it out over what they thought to be the next evolution of web technologies. And then RESTful came along, and a series of other subtle changes occurred that people just weren't expecting, or weren't expecting them to be as impactful as they were. Mobile phones, the power of the phones in our pockets, and how most discretionary media consumption is drifting off of the large screens. And so you got large screens at home, which is mostly reserved for subscription services like Netflix and iTunes, I guess, if you're using Apple TV. And the big screens at the office are reserved for things like spreadsheets and doing business stuff. And then all your personal time, when you're walking around, when you're on your commute, whatever, most people are consuming. Sometimes I'm producing media, but in any case, that media deal, I give you content, you watch my advertiser's ads, who pays for my content, the media deal is often going on these tiny little screens. So the basic presumptions and fundamentals of the industry are being questioned. People are going online at an enormous rate. You know, there's around 7 billion people on the planet, and like 2 billion of them are online already. And there are far more web-capable devices now with all these Android phones than there are people online. So the online people generally have 2 or 3 such web-capable or internet-capable devices. And if they don't keep them, they're just going out to other people, expanding the number of people who are online, or maybe in worse scenarios, going into the trash. You know, we've got the lingua francas of the web. We've got the web browser and web apps and everything web, with the JavaScript handling all that, you know, user interaction and, you know, graphics front end stuff. So JavaScript is PostScript, the interactive output, input, I/O, human I/O layer of touch screens and, you know, interactive data reports, everything, right? We've got a common page input, output, description, animation language, and that is JavaScript, combined with CSS, combined with a web browser. And that is the equivalent of PostScript of yesteryear, the black and white high resolution thing that disrupted the page layout, or created the page layout, created the desktop publishing industry, replacing the more traditional printing process that preceded it. And so that stuff is happening over and over. It's happening with us, with our tools today, and very rarely do you have a chance to sort of latch on to a bunch of tools and sort of evolve with them and grow with them through their duration, and their duration turning out to actually be quite long. It's easy to grab onto tools that have this big, bursty, splashy time in the market, creates lots of, fad-based millionaires, new companies, the Web 2.0 explosion, the machine learning explosion that's going on now. But when you're looking for just those basics, those fundamentals, what are the tools that can be with you for a very, very long time, you have to find your way to things like a general Unix/Linux working environment, a general purpose programming language that brings a lot of goodies to the table so you can express yourself freely and spontaneously and expertly. And you gotta have ways to format it for consumption and interaction by your audience. And most of the time that means web user interface design, but I leverage a trick, a pretty nifty trick that I started ages ago when I created 360i Tiger for 360i, an application of much acclaim in its day, or some acclaim. It helped get them recognition for having proprietary technology bits in their marketing offerings. And 360i, you may remember, is the company that did the tweet for Oreo, "You can still dunk in the dark," when they had the equipment malfunction at the Super Bowl in the blackout. And I did it again with an application called Pipulate that has so far had a couple of renditions in the free and open source world. First as a Flask-based application, the micro web framework under Python called Flask, where there was a web server, and I did, knick-knack communication to do streaming. So I did streaming without opening like WebSockets or anything. It was just a single page load, built the user interface, and then started updating fuel gauges and progress bars and URL, progress outputs into the form it just built on the same page build. And it was fun. It was really fun, but I had to wind that down quickly because it wasn't what I really needed. I tried doing a frameworky thing again called Pipulate, through just connecting it to Jupyter Notebook. And in a library you import to Jupyter Notebook, now you can do Pipulate and it gets the Flask stuff out of the picture, the web server stuff out of the picture, because Jupyter Notebook is enough for most things. And then I realized once you're in Jupyter Notebook and you've sort of mastered that Python-y expression, spontaneous expressiveness, and you work with the GSpread library, which is already a, spreadsheet manipulation, web spreadsheet manipulation for humans kind of thing, and suddenly every job is custom, every job resists frameworks. Your framework suddenly becomes a non-framework framework, a non-system system, where you just mock things up quickly over here in Jupyter Notebook, and you pluck out those things ready for automation, and you put them over here in whatever automation system you use. But as I've been talking about for the last several days, my automation system is squeezing every bit you can out of a single Amazon EC2 instance. And when the drives start to get a little full, switch as many of those external file saves to the Amazon S3 service, and bam, lightweight Python middleware between your API over here, your API over here, your input-output layer, and your monkey in the middle scheduling system, making sure everything happens when it should, and if it doesn't, you get alerts and stuff. So, data master, right? You're not you're not relying on all the formidable resources that are at your disposal through the DevOps team and the developers. If you go to them with your hat in your hand and you sit in the queue like everyone else, or you just do it. I just do it. The age of the fill-in-the-blank master is back, but it's not the webmaster anymore. You're not going to land those jobs like that. What you got to do is got to be a data master, because those jobs and opportunities and tasks and challenges are out there aplenty. So thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you soon, and don't forget to subscribe.